Hi everyone, welcome to Desire and Dialogue. My name is Mihwa Lee, a romance author, and I am so thrilled to have our guest, Kirsten S Blacketer, who also writes under the pen name Jen Bradley. Welcome, Kirsten.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's wonderful to have you. Thanks for getting in touch with me. And when I looked up your books, I went, holy smokes, this woman's been busy.
Very busy. I've been very busy.
So tell me about your writing journey. What has it been like?
Well, I've always kind of wanted to be a writer. Dabbled with it in high school. I went to college for English. I have a bachelor's in English, and married my husband, and he was military, so we just kind of traveled around. And when I started having kids, I just was stay-at-home mom and took care of the house while he was, defending the country. And so I joined a writers group when we were stationed in Kentucky, and it really brought my passion for writing back to life. And I had been reading a lot of books from the library, and many of them were historical romance. So it really kind of put that seed to try to write my own historical romance. So in 2012, I actually bit the bullet and wrote my first medieval romance for National Novel Writing Month, which is November. So it was 50,000 words in 1 month. So that kind of started my journey.
I know that you write both historical, contemporary, right? And now you're writing romantasy?
Well, I've kind of dabbled. I always tell people, I'm like, I can't stay in my lane. They're always like, pick one subgenre and stick to it. And I'm like, I just can't, because that's not how I read. So I like to bounce around. I'll read historical, I'll read contemporary, I'll read romantasy, all over the place. So when I write, it's kind of the same thing. I started with historical romance, with medieval, and then I did a Prohibition. I did a late Victorian novella series, and then I did a steampunk Victorian story. But then in 2020, I was living in Italy, and we were on lockdown, and I had an idea for a contemporary romance. And I was like, well, I have all the time in the world right now. I'm just going to sit down and write it. So I wrote a lockdown love affair. And then the secondary characters from that book wanted their book, and it just snowballed from there. So then it was kind of my segue into contemporary. And then I just started writing as much as I could, and started building my backlist. And so I expanded into fantasy fairy tale. And then I wrote a time travel story, which goes to the 80s. So that might be where you picked up the 80s from.
Yeah.
So I wrote a series set in 1985 with some time travel elements. And then I think it was last year, I was just scrolling through Twitter X and found an artist that was posting this gorgeous cover, and she's like, any authors want this? And I snatched it up, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing, because it was a monster romance cover. I felt like I was a little out of my element, but I love the movie The Mummy. And so I really wanted to try my hand at it, because I love The Mummy and I love the Egyptian mythology. So I was like, well, we're just going to try it and see where it leads.
So whenever you are inspired by something, that's the genre you're writing in?
Yeah, if I get an idea for it, or if I see an image or a cover or something that sparks an idea, I always write it down, because I don't always get a chance to get to it right away. But there's some of them that are just so strong that I'm just like, I have to write this now.
You can't keep it down. It will not be silenced.
No.
What do you write under Jen Bradley versus Kirsten?
So back when I first started my my author journey in 2012, I had an idea for a Wicked Prince, kind of modeled after Loki. And so I created the pen name of Jen Bradley to kind of keep them separate, because I thought it was going to be a little darker than what I typically write. But as my writing style has evolved and grown and developed, I noticed that it was very similar to the Kirsten style. So I just decided at some point just to merge the two together and just let everybody know that I write as both. Just because it was easier for me in the long run, because trying to maintain two pen names on all the social media platforms and websites and everything, it's just overwhelming. Yeah. And so I was trying to make life a little easier for myself. And I wasn't writing as much as Jen, that I really wanted to be. I'm only one person. I can only write so fast. So I have a trilogy out and then a prequel for the trilogy just under Jen, and they're all medieval. So, and then I have a couple of novellas that are just kind of fun little stories on the side that are contemporary. But
So how many books do you have in your backlist?
I think on my last count, with all of my novels and novellas together, it was 35.
That's a lot.
And a lot of those were the last 4 years. It was really,
Oh my goodness.
yeah, my challenge to myself in 2020 was to see how fast I could write and be comfortable with it, with my schedule. And so I did 3 books in 2020. I did 5 books in 21. I did 7 books in 22. And then I did 5 books in 23. So a majority of my backlist was the last couple years.
What's the name of the book that's coming out on October 29th?
So the title of the book coming out next week on the 29th is Death and Desire. And it is an...
Death and Desire.
Yes, it is it's Egyptian romance, it's paranormal romance, it's monster romance, and it's historical romance. So a little bit of everything in there.
So in terms of your writing style and your craft, do you see the difference between your very first and the last book?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. My very first book, I remember there were quite a few rounds of edits that I changed very big pieces of the story to kind of fit the plot. And that was because I was a pantser at the time. So I just wrote it. And then during the editing process, I went through and readjusted things and fleshed scenes out and filled in any plot holes. Now my process includes doing a very general outline before I start the book. So not only does it keep me on track, but it also keeps me focused just for the day. So I can look up and say, okay, I need to write one scene. This is the scene. This is what needs to happen. It definitely helps keep me a little more organized. And so my process is a little smoother for me, especially during the editing process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds like how I used to write as well. My first book took 2 years because I rewrote pretty much the whole thing 3 times.
Yeah, those first books were very challenging for me in the editing stages. And now I've gotten to the point where the editing isn't as much of a challenge as it used to be because I write cleaner. I write a little more organized, so I don't have to do such massive changes in that stage of the game.
What is the steam level of your books?
So, funny story. People always ask me, Steam stats, and I laugh because everybody seems to have their own measuring system, and Steam is kind of a very subjective thing. I had a friend who asked me if Emily Henry, she's like Emily Henry is steamy, and I was like, then mine are gonna scorch you because it's so it's very subjective. But I came up with my own Steam stats that I'm going to put on my website so that people can kind of get an idea of what to expect from my books. But I typically do my rating for mine is 3 chili pepper. So I'm like right in the middle. It's always open door. I use descriptive language, and there's at least 2 to 3 scenes in each book. Some of my earlier ones have less steam. So anywhere from 2 to 3, depending on the book. But my goal is always to try to build the sexual tension as much as possible. I live for that build of tension. So when they finally connect, you get that fireworks display, the butterflies in your stomach, and we're so excited that they finally connected. So that's, yeah. There's like this cathartic moment when they finally hook up and you're like, oh my God, thank you.
Yeah. So are we talking about 2 to 3 orgasms when we talk about steam scenes?
Yeah, typically we do. It's typically over 2 scenes. Again, it just depends on the book. I write the scenes if they fit the story, if they fit the progression of the plot, if it's needed to show character development or the connection with the characters. I don't ever add it just for giggles because I want to add an extra steamy scene. I used to.
I wouldn't be complaining about that if you wanted to do that.
Sometimes there's a time and a place for that extra bonus steamy scene, but for me, I've actually read some stories where it's like the scene just keeps going and going. You're like, okay, I'm kind of bored now, guys. I need more story.
Oh, do your families and friends know you write steamy?
Yes. I don't hide it. I'm very forthright about it. Even my children know that I write steamy romance.
Oh, good for you.
And my son is he's 17 and he's in college right now, doing classes. And he's been telling all of his college classmates about his mom. Yeah. So So I've been getting some of my new readers from his college classes.
Well, good for him. I love that. Yeah. None of his friends have propositioned you yet?
No, it's kind of funny because I just did a signing at our local library 2 weeks ago, and he had brought one of his classmates over, and she bought one of my books. She's 20, and they befriended each other, and then he saw another one of his classmates in the parking lot who's in his 40s, and his wife was there, and so when she found out that I wrote that, she came in and she bought I think she bought 7 of my books that day. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So
Okay.
I was extremely blessed.
So did you give him any commission or did you pocket it all?
Oh, he always gets, little bonus gifts here and there. I always like to pick things up for him when he's out. I have some great kids and they help me out a lot, especially when I'm on a deadline and I just got to get stuff done. So
Yeah. And you fed him for 17 years. You don't owe him anything. I was only kidding. Yeah.
he's spoiled.
But I like to hire him to market my books. So how do you keep the sex scenes fresh after 35 books or so?
For me, it's really about connecting with the characters, kind of knowing their personalities, what they're comfortable with, and then the intensity of the scene. Is it a really sweet, romantic, lovey moment? Is it very impassioned? Is it like a desperate need for connection? So I kind of go off of that and then just let the characters kind of lead the way. And I don't know, I have this kind of sixth sense that I can feel when I'm writing if the direction doesn't flow. So I do that for a lot of my scenes, but especially the sex scenes, because it's so hard to keep something like that fresh and unique without going overboard. But for me, it's also about showing a balance between the physicality of the act and also balancing out the emotional piece of it with whoever's point of view that I'm in. So just making sure that there's some kind of a deeper need for the scene to really show the connection with the characters. And sometimes it gets really creative, and other times it's just very straightforward. So I really do rely on the emotional piece of it to really make it a unique experience, not just for the characters, but for the reader too.
The deeper the emotional connection, the harder the sex.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Same appendage, same hole, but it's gonna be more fun than the other.
Right.
If there's, higher at stakes. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
How do you feel about your fans masturbating to your words?
I had a friend who is a guy friend of mine who used to read a lot of my stuff. I think he still does, but he used to be my go-to beta reader. And I sent him a short story that I did once, and he made the mistake of reading it at work. And he texted me and he goes, "I hate you right now." And I'm like, "Well, why?" And he goes, "Because I couldn't stand up at my desk for 2 hours." And I was like, tried to warn you not to do that. So that was like the highest compliment for me is like,
yes,
I'm extremely uncomfortable right now because I'm not at home. Like, sorry.
Yeah, that is a huge compliment. Yeah. And good for you, Kirsten's friend, for holding back at work.
Right. Showing restraint.
Obviously not a virgin.
No.
So are there any books that you haven't written that you would like to write?
If I could venture out of my romance comfort zone, which I highly doubt that's ever going to happen because I don't think I can write anything without romance in it. But I've always wanted to try my hand at a murder mystery. I just, or just something with that level of intrigue and twist and revelations and uncovering secrets, and I try to tie those elements into the books that I write, especially the one that I'm writing right now. But it's hard because with a romance, as you know, the focus has to be on the relationship. It's not on the side plot. So that plot is what's pushing them together, but the focus is really on their relationship dynamic. So I would love to do one that's a little more on the murder mystery side, but I don't know. Maybe I'll get there at some point, but
I think it's coming based on your history.
I mean, I just did a monster romance, so I mean, anything's possible at this point.
Tell me about your monster romance that's coming out next week. Death and Desire?
Yes. So this is my hardcover. I have my little...
Oh.
I have a special edition hardcover that I had.
That's beautiful.
So, but this is the cover that I saw that completely, like, threw me for a loop.
Mm-hmm.
So I fell in love with it, and she did such an amazing job. The artist is Phantom Dame, and she does a lot of monster romance cover art. So, but she worked with me with this one to make sure that I had everything I needed for all my different versions, and I loved it. But diving into writing a monster romance, first of all, but also something that's set in Egypt in the 30s, I had to do some digging. And, as with every other historical time period, there's always, questionable events that went on that caused a lot of controversy. But I was looking at it more through the lens of like the way The Mummy did it, where they were focused really on the characters and the plot that was pushing it forward, rather than on what's going on in society as a whole at the time. So, but having a character who's an Egyptian god as your hero definitely made it complicated, because it's kind of like those 1,000-year-old fae characters, and then you've got this really young heroine, and so there's that kind of like, you don't want to come off like creepy, but you also want to keep the keep it interesting. So it was an interesting dynamic to try to do the historical elements with the paranormal elements with, his, because he has 3 forms in the book. He has his god form, which is on the cover. He has human form, and then he also has an animal form, like an actual dog form.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to represent him in his different forms in different parts of the book. So that was an interesting device to balance through the book too, because I wanted to make it that they interacted quite frequently, but sometimes she wouldn't know if she was seeing him or if he was really there. So there were I did allow him to have the ability, they are able to speak to each other in their minds. So
she knew about the 3 different forms.
So not up front, but I think as the story progresses, she encounters the human form first, and then when she gets the reveal of him in his god form, and then she realizes she was seeing him in his animal form, just kind of scattered throughout. So she picks up on it, but at first it's not super obvious to anyone but the reader that there's something kind of unique about this character.
And that makes it intriguing in itself.
It's
because
really
of the hidden identity. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And especially him trying to be human, because the overall premise of it is that Anubis wants his heart removed so that he can better do his job. And so he goes to Ra in the very beginning of the book, in the prologue, and asks Ra to remove his heart. And he asks him if he wants to destroy it. And he says, no, don't destroy it, but let's put it somewhere safe. So he ends up hiding it in a jewel and burying it. And
interesting.
And it ends up being found by grave robbers, who then sell it to a visiting noblewoman who takes it back to England and gives it to her daughter. So.
And it's a daughter.
The daughter is Violet, who is the heroine of the story. But then she starts having dreams about this mysterious figure, and he's trying to connect with her through the stone. So it creates an interesting dilemma for her, because she's she's fascinated by Egypt and she wants to go see Egypt. So it definitely has a little bit of the mummy vibes with Evelyn's obsession with Egyptian history.
I love that. I love that premise.
Yeah, so he's got to try to get his heart back.
So she has his heart even before they meet.
So yeah, it's it's an interesting dynamic between the two of them because he calls her little thief because she stole his heart, but not in the way that everybody else.
Yeah, and how does he? I mean, I don't want any spoilers, so yeah. But how does he fall in love with her if he's lacking a heart?
So for him, and that's kind of something that evolves over time, is that his heart, just because he doesn't possess it, doesn't mean it still doesn't affect him. He's still connected to it. It's just removed. So, and I think that was one of the tricks that Ra had up his sleeve was like, we're not going to destroy it. We're just going to hide it because he knew at some point he may change his mind. And so he left that opportunity to, shift that back to, if he wanted to recuperate that ability.
So people can find it on Amazon only, or are you wide?
I'm wide. All of my books are wide. In ebook form, and then I do offer all of my paperbacks through Amazon, and I do if people want a signed copy, they can always send me a message, or we can do an order that way, because I know I like signed copies, so I like to leave that as an option for people if they so desire. So
if it's wide, where else can people find your books?
So I use Draft to Digital to distribute all of my work, other than Amazon. Amazon I upload directly, but they do Kobo, Apple, Barnes & Noble. I believe I also selected for the libraries to do it. So if someone wants to request it through the library, they can do that as well. So there's quite a variety of options. And I also offer, so if anyone's interested in joining my ARC team, I also offer ebook ARCs for all of my books to my ARC team a couple months before release date.
And what's the best way to find you or keep in touch with you?
I have a monthly newsletter. I do a monthly blog post with all of my updates for both of those. Newsletter always gets a little extra bonus stuff that's going on. They also get access to free short stories for being subscribers. I also have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter X, and TikTok. So I do post the most regularly on Instagram and Facebook, but you can find me on the other platforms too.
So what's your handle on Instagram?
So it's Kir Blackship. KIR Blackship.
Okay. And what's your website address?
It's KirstenSBlacketer.com. Since 2014. So 10 years I've been doing the self-publishing.
And how has self-publishing changed in the past 10 years?
So many more resources now for self-published authors. I love the variety that's out there that people, for cover artists, for editors, it's just, there's so much more available for us to utilize to grow our craft and to make sure that we have a solid platform to build our backlist. But when I first started, it was very intimidating because it still had that stigma attached to it that self-published wasn't good quality. It wasn't, you could just write a book and slap it on the internet and you were done. That's never how I viewed my journey as a self-published author. I take great pride in ensuring that my cover is solid, that my edits are good, that everything looks very professional when I upload a book. And I get a lot of compliments on that when I do in-person events because they're like, you're self-published? Yes, because I did a lot of research to make sure that I was on point with trying to reach the readers that would enjoy my book the most.
So people starting out now, I think the journey would be much easier than when you started 10 years ago. A lot of things are automated.
Yeah, and I think starting in it now, I think the biggest problem would be a lot of new authors are going to view other authors and other books as competition. And a couple years ago, I wrote a blog post that was saying that other authors are not competition, they're community, because readers are voracious. They will read and read and read. And I see it time and time again in the groups that I'm a member of, that people be like, I read this book, I loved it. Does anyone have any recommendations for other books that are like it? So I think that we are, the author community, we're our best advocates for each other, which is why I try to read a variety of other indie authors, because if I can recommend a book to somebody because they're looking for something specific that I read and enjoyed, then I will absolutely promote other authors that are basically in the same boat I am. We're just trying to find readers that will enjoy the stories that we tell. So I never see other authors as competition, and I have seen people complain and be like, well, this idea was really close to something that I wrote. Just because you have the same idea, it does not mean that somebody took it from you, or, because those ideas evolve and change depending on the author's idea and their experiences and their character development for that specific story. So I am a huge advocate for people to be like, yeah, if you like that idea, you run with it, because it's not going to sound anything like mine.
And that's an integral part of creating art anyways. We're all influenced by one another, by our culture, and we're all working on maybe, a dozen of the same tropes that we recycle through over and over again, but every story is unique.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's why I love tropes so much. I think that's one of the fun things, is just like rolling the die and see where where the direction goes, and just have fun with it.
Let's, conjure up a 1,000-year-old god who turns into a haughty human. See where that leads. Was there anything that surprised you while you were writing it? Did you think, oh, Kirsten, you're kinkier than you thought? Or, oh, it's dark.
No, as much as I say that, I'm like, I really want to go dark. I don't know that I don't know that I can. I don't know that that's my style, to go like real dark. Writing Death and Desire, I think, well, I kept thinking over and over in my head. I'm like, I don't know if people are going to like this or not, because especially when he shows her his god form, he's well over 7 foot. And so there's a notable size difference between Anubis and Violet. And so writing the scene where they actually have sex in that form was probably the strangest for me, just because I was like, this is way outside of anything I've ever written before, and I don't know if anyone's going to enjoy it. But I was assured by all of my beta readers and all of my ARC readers that it worked. It worked.
So I bet there's a lot of fun banters in your books, and
I do love banter, especially when the contemporaries more so, because they get a little snarkier. I had a couple of readers who were like, do you really need to swear in your books? I'm like, listen, if he's a police officer, yes, he's going to swear.
He's going to swear.
Who is a former military man, he's going to swear. And so again, it's just like the sex scenes. I don't put it in there to get a rise out of people. I try to stay true to the character. If that character is going to drop the F-bomb, then we're dropping the F-bomb, and that's just how it's going to be. So I try to keep it as true to character as possible for each of the stories. So everyone's going to be a little bit different, but my stories are always swoony, they're always sweary, and they're always steamy.
Those are good 3 X's to have.
Yeah, but I love to have those moments of just where they're at each other's throats and they're just flinging back and forth, and you're just waiting. And it's typically the best banter is before they've ever kissed, and you just have it just going back and forth, and you can just feel the tension crackle.
Yeah, because a heartbreak is going to be more intense after that kind of connection. I mean, you're a tension builder.
And sometimes it's not even just the breakup. It's this realization that they're like, I have to adjust things because it's not working. We're not on the same page. Back when I first started writing, conflict was really hard for me to write, because as an individual, I avoid conflict as much as I can. I hate conflict. But in a story, it's crucial to the story progression. But I read a book, and her definition of conflict kind of was a light bulb moment for me. It was when two characters' goals don't align. That's it. That's all the conflict is. It doesn't have to be anything big or crazy. It's just when this person and this person are not on the same page. That's it.
Wonderful. I think that's all, Kirsten. It was so lovely to have you on the show.
It was great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So Kirsten S Blacketer, check out her new release, Death and Desire. Releasing on October 29th, releasing wide on D2D or Amazon. You get to read about a woman having sex with a god, a human, and a dog.
No, she doesn't have sex with the dog form. I'm just throw that out there. So just
You can.
I had now I think that was my hard limit.
Maybe an ex.
I don't know that.
When Kirsten is 70, seen it all, done it.
Yeah, maybe I'll come back to that. I don't know. We'll see.
So check out the Death and Desire October 29th on Amazon and D2D. And follow Kirsten on KIR Black Ship, all one word, on Instagram.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much. It was so much fun having you.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
I learned so much as well.
Well, it was great to be here. Thank you again. I appreciate it.
Best of luck with your Victorian romance. That's your work in progress.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'm doubling down. It's due January 1st, so I have to get on it.
Yeah, well, don't be slacking off.
No, I got to go right now.
Your friends are waiting.
They're waiting.
All right.